My name is Wendy Basinger, and I'm 29 years old. If you'd told me a year ago that a relationship I thought was solid would end because a pack of coworkers decided I didn't match his lifestyle, I would have rolled my eyes and called it a bad rom-com plot. But it happened, quietly, clinically, like my worth could be summarized in a group chat. And the worst part? The breakup itself wasn't even the messiest thing. The mess came after, when the person who walked away started losing his mind watching me move on. Back then, my life was simple in the best way. I work as an operations coordinator for a logistics company in Arizona. It's not glamorous, but it's steady. It's the kind of job where nobody applauds you when everything runs smoothly, because smooth is the expectation. My day-to-day is coordinating shipments between warehouses and clients, managing scheduling conflicts, and making sure products get from point A to point B without someone screaming on a conference call. We distribute consumer electronics, so there's always something. Delayed trucks, damaged inventory, clients demanding updates every 15 minutes, like I personally control the highway. I started as a junior coordinator, making okay money. Within 3 years, I got 2 promotions. Not because I'm a genius, but because I show up, I communicate, and I solve problems before they become disasters. My boss trusted me with bigger accounts and messy clients because she knew I wouldn't panic. I make about $73,000 a year, closer to $85,000, with bonuses and benefits. It's not Silicon Valley money, but in Arizona, it means I can breathe. I can save. I can plan. In 2020, I bought a 2-bedroom condo when prices were still reasonable. The previous owner had to relocate fast, so I got a deal and spent 6 months fixing it up myself. I replaced fixtures, repainted everything, upgraded the kitchen appliances, and turned the second bedroom into a combined office and workout space. Nothing Pinterest perfect, just functional, clean, mine. My dad taught me basic home repair growing up, not in a sentimental bonding way either, more like, you should know how to take care of yourself so you never have to beg anyone. Back then, I thought he was being harsh. Now I realize he was handing me armor. I drive a 2019 Honda Accord, certified pre-owned, charcoal gray, reliable, paid off, and maintained like clockwork. Oil changes every 5,000 miles, tire rotations on schedule, interior detailed twice a year. I've always believed you can tell a lot about someone by how they treat what they already have. I've been hitting the gym consistently for about 4 years. I started because my doctor warned me my cholesterol was creeping up. The first month was brutal, waking up at 5:30 a.m., muscles aching in places I didn't know existed, bargaining with myself like, if I survive today, I'll never do this again. But then something clicked. I got stronger. I slept better. My confidence stopped being something I pretended to have and became something I simply lived in. I lost about 30 pounds over the first year and a half, not because I was chasing a perfect body, but because I was chasing a version of myself who didn't feel tired all the time. Dating was where the exhaustion lived. Most of the men I met in my late 20s were either allergic to commitment or sprinting toward marriage like it was a finish line they needed to hit before 30. I wanted something in the middle, real, but not rushed, something steady without being dull. Apps felt like a marketplace, everyone curating an identity, everyone trying to look like a prize instead of a person. I went on more first dates than I care to admit. A few second dates. One short relationship that fizzled because he wanted kids immediately, and I wasn't ready to build a nursery with someone who still didn't know my middle name. So when I met Evan last July at my friend Jake's barbecue, I wasn't expecting much. He walked in like he belonged in every room he entered. Tall, clean cut, easy smile. He had that polished look, expensive watch, crisp shirt even in the heat, the kind of confidence that comes from being told you're impressive your entire life. Jake's girlfriend introduced us near the grill while I was flipping burgers with a spatula like it was a weapon. Evan held out a store-bought potato salad like it was an offering. I come bearing carbs, he said, grinning. I laughed because it was stupid and charming and I'm not made of stone. He asked what I did for work. When I said logistics, he didn't pretend to understand. He actually listened, or at least it felt that way. He told me he was in pharmaceutical sales. His job involved driving to clinics, meeting doctors, hitting quotas, and keeping up appearances. He joked about unrealistic targets and corporate nonsense. I made jokes about trucks breaking down at the worst possible time. We talked about hiking spots, bad first dates, and whether pineapple belongs on pizza. The conversation flowed like we'd known each other longer than 15 minutes. By the time the burgers were done, I had his number. Evan drove a leased BMW, white, 2 years old, spotless inside. The interior smelled like leather and whatever expensive cologne he wore. He lived in a one-bedroom apartment decorated like a model unit, matching pillows, coordinated colors, not a sock out of place. At first, I thought it was attractive. It looked like he had his life together. But looking back, it wasn't together. It was curated. We started dating quickly. Our first real date was at an Italian place he suggested. Mid-range, good lighting, the kind of restaurant where people take pictures of their plates. He ordered confidently, talked about his territory and bonuses, and asked me questions about my job, like he was genuinely curious. Second date was a movie. Third date, I cooked at my place, and he seemed genuinely impressed that I owned real cookware and knew how to use it. He kissed me at my kitchen counter and said, "You're different from what I'm used to." I should have asked what that meant. By August, we were seeing each other 2 or 3 times a week. By October, we had each other's keys. I met his parents over video chat. They asked polite questions about my job and my intentions, like I was applying for a position. Everything looked healthy on paper, but there were little things. Evan cared about appearances the way some people care about oxygen. He'd stress about what to wear to casual hangouts. He'd check photos before letting anyone post them. He'd comment on strangers in public, whether a woman was too pretty for her boyfriend, whether a man looked like he could do better. It wasn't a one-off comment, it was a pattern. And then there were his coworkers. They were always there, even when they weren't physically in the room. His phone buzzed constantly with their group chat. He'd come home from happy hours and narrate conversations like I was supposed to be invested in who bought what car, who got promoted, who was dating who. There was one name that kept coming up, Vanessa. Vanessa was a coworker from his sales team. Early 30s, drove a Porsche, always dressed like she was stepping out of a magazine. Evan talked about her like she was an authority, like her opinion carried weight in a way no one else's did. If Vanessa liked a restaurant, Evan suddenly wanted to go there. If she said a workout trend was the move, he'd mention it to me like it was a revelation. At first, I shrugged it off. Work friendships can be intense. Sales culture is weird. People bond through pressure. But by November, things started feeling off. Evan would go quiet during conversations, his attention drifting to his phone. He'd make subtle comments about my job, asking if I'd ever considered switching to something more dynamic. He'd mention how much money his coworkers' partners made, like it was casual. Then he started suggesting changes to my appearance. Not directly insulting, never that obvious. Just little things framed as helpful. "You'd look amazing if you styled your hair differently. Have you thought about contacts? That dress is cute, but this cut would be more flattering." The words weren't cruel, but the undertone was. It felt like I was being gently reshaped into something that fit his world better. Like I was being presented with an upgrade list. And I didn't realize it yet, but somewhere behind his eyes, Evan was collecting data, stacking my life against an imaginary standard his coworkers had created. I was too focused on being a good girlfriend to see I was being graded like a product. The breakup came on a random Tuesday evening. We had plans for dinner and a show he'd been talking about all week. I showed up at his apartment at 6 with takeout from the Thai place he liked. Evan was sitting on the couch with his hands folded in his lap like he was waiting to deliver a presentation. He didn't get up to greet me. He didn't smile. He just looked at me like he'd rehearsed this in the mirror. And the second I stepped inside, my stomach dropped. Because no matter how polished the room looked, the air felt wrong. "Wendy," he said quietly, voice too controlled, "we need to talk." I didn't sit on the couch. Something about Evan's posture, his hands folded, his back straight, the space he left between us, told me this wasn't a conversation meant for closeness. So I set the takeout bag down on the coffee table and took the armchair across from him instead. That was the first moment my instincts tried to warn me. "We need to talk," he repeated, like saying it twice would soften the blow. "Okay," I said, keeping my voice steady. "What's going on?" He took a deep breath, the kind people take when they've practiced bad news, and finally reached the part where they deliver it. "I've been doing a lot of thinking lately," he started, "about us." There it was. That vague, dangerous phrasing people use when they've already decided something and are now just narrating it. "And?" I prompted. He didn't meet my eyes. Instead, he stared at a spot just above my shoulder, like he was reading from invisible cue cards. "I don't think this is working anymore." Just like that. No build-up, no specific incident, no argument leading up to it. One sentence that wiped out months of shared routines, inside jokes, keys on each other's counters. I felt my chest tighten, but I didn't interrupt him. "Can you be more specific?" I asked. "Did something happen? Did I do something?" He shook his head quickly. No, it's not one thing. It's just, I think we're in different places in life. Different places in life. The phrase echoed in my head because it made absolutely no sense. We were both 29, both working professionals, both financially independent. We talked about travel, maybe buying something together down the line, what the next few years could look like. "What places?" I asked calmly, "because last week you were talking about taking a trip together next spring." He shifted in his seat, finally looking at me now, but his eyes were guarded. "I just feel like I need someone who's more aligned with where I'm going," he said. "Someone who matches my energy, my ambition." There it was, the word ambition, weaponized. I stared at him, searching his face for something real. "You've never said I held you back. I've always supported your work. I've rearranged plans for your happy hours, your conferences. I listen when you vent." "I know," he said quickly. "You've been great. This isn't about you doing anything wrong." That sentence landed worse than if he'd accused me of something. Because if I hadn't done anything wrong, then why did I suddenly feel like I was being dismissed? "Then what is it about?" I pressed. He hesitated, fingers tightening together. "I've been talking to people, getting perspective." "People." I already knew who he meant. "Your coworkers?" I asked. His silence answered for him. "They've helped me realize I might be settling," he finally said, the words sounding uncomfortable even coming out of his mouth. Settling. I felt something in me go still, not angry, not sad. "Clear. So this isn't actually about us," I said slowly. "It's about what other people think we should look like together." "That's not fair," he protested. "They're just looking out for me." "By comparing me to their girlfriends?" Us, I asked. "By analyzing my job, my car, my clothes?" He flinched. "They didn't say it like that," he said, "but they did point out that maybe I could be with someone who fits my lifestyle better." Lifestyle. I almost laughed. I thought about my condo, my paid-off car, my savings account, my routines, the way I built my life brick by brick instead of leasing it. "And you agree with them?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer right away. That pause told me everything. "I think they have a point," he said finally. "I just don't want to wake up one day and realize I played it safe when I could have aimed higher." Higher. As if I were a rung on a ladder. I waited for the sting to hit, for the tears, for the urge to argue, to list out everything I'd accomplished, everything I brought to the table. But instead, something unexpected happened. I felt tired. Tired of defending a life I was proud of. Tired of being evaluated against imaginary benchmarks set by people who didn't know me. I nodded slowly. "So this is your decision?" "Yes," he said, relief flickering across his face when I didn't explode. "I think it's best for both of us." I stood up. That surprised him. "That's it?" he asked, blinking. "You're not going to say anything?" "I am," I said, grabbing my jacket from the chair. "Just not what you're expecting." He leaned forward, like he suddenly realized he was losing control of the narrative. "I'm not going to convince you," I continued. "If you need a committee to decide whether I'm worth your time, then you're not the person I thought you were." "That's not what this is," he insisted. I don't want to be with someone who measures love in optics," I said, "who confuses ambition with approval, or stability with stagnation." His mouth opened, then closed. "You're really just walking away?" he asked. "Yes," I said simply, "because you already did." I walked to the door. Behind me, he called out, "I hope we can still be friends." I didn't turn around. I drove home in silence, my thoughts louder than the engine. When I got inside my condo, I set the takeout on the counter and stared at it like it belonged to someone else. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Evan. "I think maybe we rushed this conversation. Can we talk more later?" I read it once, then again, and then I muted his number. The next few days were a blur. Friends reacted exactly how you'd expect. Outrage on my behalf, creative suggestions involving his tires, long speeches about how I deserve better. I appreciated the support, but underneath it all, I felt strangely calm. Being dumped hurts. There's no denying that. But sometimes it hurts less than realizing how long you've been shrinking to fit someone else's expectations. I replayed the relationship in my head and started seeing things I'd ignored. The subtle comparisons. The way his tone changed when talking about his coworkers' partners. The suggestions that weren't suggestions. I realized I hadn't lost something valuable. I'd been released from something exhausting. That didn't mean I didn't question myself. I sat with the discomfort and asked the hard questions. Was there any truth to what he said? Had I gotten too comfortable? Had I stopped pushing myself? The answer surprised me. I wasn't stagnant. I was stable. And stability had somehow become a flaw in a world obsessed with appearances. Still, I decided to channel the energy into something productive. Not because I wanted to prove Evan wrong, but because I wanted to see how far I could go when I stopped being distracted by someone else's approval. In January, I scheduled a meeting with my boss. Not to complain, not to vent. To ask about growth. She looked almost amused when I told her I was interested in advancing. "We were wondering when you'd say that," she said. "We've been considering you for a senior role." That was the moment something shifted. Not revenge, not validation. Momentum. And while Evan thought he'd walked away from someone settling, I was just getting started. January became my reset button. Not in a dramatic New Year, New Me way, more like a quiet recalibration. Small, intentional adjustments that compounded into something bigger. That meeting with my boss stayed with me. After she told me they'd already been considering me for a senior coordinator role, I walked back to my desk feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Seen. Not evaluated, not compared, just recognized. We mapped out exactly what I needed to demonstrate over the next few months. Lead a cross-department initiative, mentor one of the newer hires, and take ownership of a problem account that had been hemorrhaging complaints. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was real. And it played directly to my strengths. I threw myself into it. I volunteered to take on projects other people avoided. I stayed late when things went sideways. I stopped waiting to be asked and started asserting myself in meetings. Not loudly, not aggressively, just confidently. At the same time, I took a hard look at my finances. I'd always been responsible, saving regularly, paying everything on time, but it had been passive, safe. I met with a financial advisor and set up a proper investment plan, increased my retirement contributions, diversified instead of letting money sit and stagnate. For the first time, I wasn't just maintaining my life. I was building it. The gym, which had always been part of my routine, became something else entirely. Not punishment, not obsession. Therapy. I hired a trainer for a few months to push past plateaus I'd quietly accepted. Cleaned up my diet. Not perfectly, but intentionally. Meal prepping instead of grabbing whatever was convenient. Drinking water instead of mindlessly reaching for caffeine. By March, I was stronger than I'd ever been. Not just physically, mentally. The mirror stopped being a place where I searched for flaws. It became a place where I recognized effort. I updated my wardrobe, too, not to chase trends or impress anyone, just better-fitting basics that reflected how I felt. I got my hair cut by an actual stylist instead of wherever had an opening. Little things that added up. And the strangest part? I felt better single than I had during the last few months with Evan. I hadn't realized how much mental space his subtle evaluations had taken up, how often I'd unconsciously ask myself whether I was enough before making decisions. Without that noise, my life felt lighter. Friends noticed. "You seem different," one of them said over drinks. Not in a breakup spiral way, in a focused way. I turned down most attempts to set me up. I wasn't closed off. I just wasn't hungry for validation anymore. That's when I met Caleb. It wasn't some cinematic meet cute. It was a Tuesday evening at the gym. I was finishing deadlifts when a guy asked if he could work in between my sets. Tall, broad-shouldered, no flashy clothes, just worn-in trainers and a faded college hoodie. "Go for it," I said. We exchanged a few polite comments about the equipment, nothing flirty. Afterward, he nodded toward my form. "Whoever taught you that knew what they were doing." I smiled. I paid them very well. That made him laugh. We started seeing each other at the gym regularly after that, spotting each other, sharing equipment, grabbing smoothies afterward because neither of us wanted to go home and cook immediately. Caleb worked as a civil engineer for a firm that designed commercial buildings. He owned a house he'd bought a few years earlier. Drove a practical SUV he'd paid off. Talked about his job like it was something he enjoyed, not something he used to measure himself against others. What struck me most wasn't what he had. It was what he didn't care about. He didn't ask what kind of car I drove, didn't comment on my job in a way that implied hierarchy. When I talked about work, he asked questions because he was genuinely curious, not because he was collecting information. We started hanging out outside the gym. He came over one weekend to help me fix a plumbing issue under my sink. I found out he was weirdly good at home repairs, not in a "let me handle that, sweetheart" way, but in a "here, I'll show you how" way. I helped him move a piece of furniture he'd bought secondhand. We ordered pizza and ate it on the floor because neither of us felt like being formal. Somewhere along the way, Friendship slid quietly into something else. No dramatic declaration, no pressure. By April, we were dating. Officially, technically, but it felt like we'd been there already. The contrast between being with Caleb and being with Evan was impossible to ignore. With Evan, everything felt performative. Where we went, what we wore, what we posted, who might see us. With Caleb, none of that mattered. He showed up when he said he would. He listened. He didn't need to impress me, or anyone. When I told him about my promotion track at work, he smiled and said, "That's awesome. You've earned it." Then he asked if I wanted tacos or Thai for dinner. No comparison, no shift in behavior. Just support. In May, the promotion came through. Senior Operations Coordinator, a 22% raise, better benefits, and a small team to manage. I sat in my car afterward and let myself feel it. Not triumph over Evan. Pride in myself. Caleb took me out to celebrate that night. Nothing extravagant, just a quiet dinner and a walk afterward. He toasted me, told me he was proud, and then treated me exactly the same as he always had. That was when it clicked. Healthy love doesn't change based on status. Around that time, Evan started reappearing at the edges of my life. At first, it was subtle. A text every few weeks. "Hey, how are you? Hope you're doing well." I didn't respond. Then mutual friends mentioned he'd been asking about me, whether I was dating anyone, what I'd been up to. I didn't ask for details, but I noticed something. The timing. The more my life seemed to move forward, the more his presence crept back in. The first time he actually saw me was in June. I was at a coffee shop with Caleb after a morning workout. We were both in gym clothes, sweaty, laughing about something stupid that had happened during our run. I noticed Evan sitting in the corner, staring. I didn't acknowledge him, didn't slow down, didn't flinch. We got our drinks and left. An hour later, my phone buzzed. A text from Evan. "Who were you with?" I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I left it on read. That's when the texts started increasing. Late night messages, apologies, statements about mistakes and reflection. I blocked his number. Then he tried Instagram. Blocked. A friend told me he'd quit his pharmaceutical sales job, that the pressure had gotten to him, that the BMW had gone back because he couldn't afford the lease anymore. Apparently, the coworker group that had once been his entire identity had splintered when the hierarchy shifted. The irony wasn't lost on me. While his world was shrinking, mine was expanding. In July, a competing company approached me about a management role. The offer was significant, enough to make me pause. I went through the interviews out of curiosity and ended up with leverage. My current company matched the salary, added vacation time, and laid out a clear path to director level. Options. Caleb and I took a hiking trip to Colorado in August, rented a cabin, spent days on trails and nights cooking together. No pressure to document everything, no staged photos. I posted a few pictures when we got back. Nothing flashy, just happiness. And that was what finally broke him. September was when Evan stopped pretending he was just checking in. It started with a DM from an unfamiliar Instagram account. No profile picture, no posts, just a long paragraph that hit my inbox late one night while Caleb and I were sitting on my couch, half watching a documentary neither of us was really paying attention to. I didn't open it right away. Something in my gut already knew who it was. When I finally did, it confirmed exactly what I expected. Evan wrote that he'd been doing a lot of reflecting, that he finally understood how much he'd let other people influence his thinking, that breaking up with me had been the biggest mistake of his life. He said seeing me happy with someone else had forced him to confront the truth. That hurt less than he probably imagined, because the way he framed it told me everything I needed to know. He hadn't missed me. He'd missed the version of himself he thought he could reclaim by taking me back. I didn't respond. I blocked the account and made my profile private. 2 days later, he showed up at my gym. I noticed him standing near the entrance while I was mid-set, frozen in place like he wasn't sure whether he was allowed to exist there. When our eyes met, his face lit up with something that looked like relief. I didn't give him the chance. I walked straight to the front desk and quietly told the staff that an ex-boyfriend was harassing me and needed to be asked to leave. They handled it professionally, firmly, no drama. He tried to argue, tried to explain. They didn't care. I watched from across the room as he was escorted out, shoulders slumped, image shattered. That night I told Caleb everything. Not in a dramatic way, just facts. "Sounds like he's learning some hard lessons," he said, shrugging. "Anyway, want to try that new pizza place?" No jealousy, no interrogation, no need to prove loyalty. Just peace. A week later, Evan crossed the line. I found a handwritten note tucked under my windshield wiper when I got home from work, which meant he'd been at my condo, waiting, watching. I took photos, documented everything, filed a harassment report through the non-emergency line, and notified my building management. I wasn't scared, but I was done. The final confrontation came a few days later. I'd just pulled into my parking spot when he stepped out from between two cars. "Please," he said, voice cracking, "just give me 2 minutes." I stayed by my car, keys in my hand, distance clear. "You have 2, I said. He looked nothing like the man I'd dated. No polished outfit, no confident posture, just sweatpants, a hoodie, and exhaustion written all over his face. "I ruined the best thing I ever had," he said. "I let people who didn't care about me convince me that you weren't enough, but you were everything, stable, kind, real." I listened, not because I owed him closure, but because I wanted to hear who he'd finally become. When he finished, I spoke calmly. "I appreciate the apology," I said, "but you're right. I did deserve better. I deserve someone who didn't need approval to recognize my worth." He started crying. "I just want forgiveness," he whispered. I shook my head gently. "I'm not responsible for your healing," I said. "That's your work to do. What I can tell you is this: until you stop letting other people decide who you love, you'll keep losing the right ones." I walked away. He didn't follow, and that was the last time I saw him. My life now is quiet, in the best way. Caleb and I are talking about moving in together next year. Nothing rushed, just intentional. My career is on a clear, upward path. I'm training for my first marathon, something I never imagined I'd do. Looking back, I understand something I didn't then. I was never not enough. I was just too real for someone who only knew how to love an image. And losing him? That wasn't a loss. It was a release.